Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Al-Baqarah, Chapter 2, and we will be covering verses 171 to 176. Not to mock the guidance of Allah, it affects human psyche, which means that if we take the verses of the Quran lightly, then we do not get any benefit out of it. Rather, we waste our time and it affects our psyche, and as a result, we remain in loss. So this aspect, we will see that it comes out of today's session very clearly. These are the references, and all the excerpts which are noted in some slides are taken from volume 3, The Meanings of the Quran. This is our contact in case anyone wishes to get in touch with Tolu Islam. Outline of today's presentation. Continuing from the previous verse, which was 170, where the Quran points to the folly of obeying the path of forefathers and not coming to the path of the Quranic guidance. This is an important issue because Quran says that we should analyze the path of everyone in the world, including the whole man-made system, and we should not follow it unquestioningly, because once we question it and find out the faults and the problems created by false beliefs, wrong beliefs, following forefathers, their traditions, customs, rituals, then our self does not develop, and as a result, we waste essential time of our life. The Quran calls it the path of Kufr, as people fail to employ their intellect and reasoning potential. Because intellect and reasoning has been given to us to be utilized, and Quran provides us the opportunity to get the best out of it. So without the Quran, we are unable to use the intellect and reasoning to that level which is related to the values given in the Quran, which leads to becoming deaf, dumb, and blind. And this is a very serious point to which the Quran points our attention, that as a result, we are unable to use our latent potentials which are provided to us at the time of our birth. It is only through the Quranic guidance that we can bring out those latent potentials which we are endowed with for acquiring new life, which is a prerequisite for the establishment of the system of Deen in the human world, which essentially means that without becoming that precise moment which is defined in the Quran, we simply cannot even think of establishing the system of Deen, because that is a requirement. And that is why we are on this platform, to enhance our understanding towards establishing the system of Deen. The Jamaat Momineen, which comes into existence by having Iman in the Quran and then doing solid deeds and then bringing out these latent potentials, and which includes understanding the problems which man-made system creates, we come together and create this Jamaat. The Jamaat Momineen is instructed to consume the Rizq, the means of sustenance provided on the planet Earth within the guidelines of the Quran. Haram and Halal are clearly spelled out in the Book of Allah, and staying within these limits provides protection and further growth. Haram means those things which are forbidden by the Quran, and Halal means which are allowed and permitted. And this is not only related to the edible things. There is a lot discussed in the Quran regarding this, but we will look at a smaller part of this issue of Haram and Halal today. Those who transgress the values of the book, they purchase fire instead of freedom from fear and grief. Going against the permanent values leads to creating a world full of chaos and conflicts, and the evidence for that is visible in the world of 2026 in which we are living. The Quran contains al-haq, and those who look for differences find themselves in a state of schism. And we have gone through this, the definition of al-haq, which means that all those acts which create constructive results. So al-haq means that this universe, this world, human beings are created as part of that program of Allah, which is al-haq, to produce constructive results. But those constructive results can only be created if we follow the values of the Quran. We go to the first verse of today's presentation, verse 171. Not using intellect and reasoning, as noted in the Quran, leads to an animalistic life. وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. The simile of religious leaders and those who follow them is like a flock of sheep with a shepherd in the rear. The shepherd has learned some sounds from his forefathers without words, and some words without meanings. He utters these sounds and keeps repeating them, and the flock of sheep who are used to these sounds keep turning around in tune with these sounds. And nowadays we can see that the media plays this role, and the politicians use the media effectively to guide people towards their own ends. Neither the shepherd knows the meaning and purpose of these sounds, nor are the flock of sheep capable of understanding these sounds. These are those deaf, dumb, and blind ones who do not use their intellect. See how Quran very clearly says that if you do not use your intellect and reasoning, then essentially you come down to the level of animals. They are human beings, yet animals, rather worse than that. Animals are constrained as they do not have the ability to think and reason, and these animal-looking human beings who are possessors of these potentials adopt the path of animals. Quran has used quite a strong language over here, but this language is not derogatory, but is stating the facts. Because Quran tells us the way things are. These are based on facts, and we can see the example of this in our world of today. Why does the Quran put so much emphasis on its guidance? We should not consider it derogatory when the Quran compares the behavior of people to be like those living an animalistic life who do not employ their intellect and reasoning in its value system. And this means, as students of the Quran, we have to take it extremely seriously and not to be afraid of quoting these verses of the Quran to others and telling them that we should grow out of this basic animalistic type of living. Because over here we are creating more problems and not solving problems. And wider humanity is suffering because of this kind of attitude, particularly of the elite. Though it is important to fully acknowledge the biological side of our existence as far as our finite physical life is concerned on planet Earth, the Quranic focus is on self-development. And I have highlighted this. We should always keep in mind that self-development is the purpose of our life. That is the purpose for which we should be making efforts, because that puts our this life as well as the life of the hereafter in correct perspective. Human life is based on making choices. As we continue to tread on the journey of our life, the Quran invites us to raise the level of our awareness beyond the biological imperatives so that when we make choices, we bear in mind the aspects of our self-development, i.e., take a long-term view of our life, which includes the life of the hereafter. And this is another important point, that all the time we should keep in mind that what choices we are making now are going to impact our hereafter in this life as well as of the life of the hereafter. That means if we are making precisely those choices which the Quran has asked us to make within the permanent values, then we should be very optimistic about our future, because the good results of what we do today will be awaiting us in the future. And B, recognizing the existence of the self, that is nafs, is a prerequisite to understanding the Quranic values which are applicable to self's further development. And that is why, for example, in Surah Hashr, Quran says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha wal tanzur nafsumma qaddamat ligad. That, oh, those who are Momineen and have become muttaqi, you should always see what you are sending for your tomorrow forward. So whatever we do today, we should be aware of it. So Quran wants us to be extremely conscious of our choices at every point of decision making in our life. No matter to what degree we use our intellect and reasoning within the man-made systems, without the guidance of the Quran, we will not be able to access the choice provided by the Book of Allah. And this is another very important point for us to remember as students of the Quran, that living life under man-made system is living life without any choice for a system. So Quran is the one which is providing another choice before us, that is the system of Deen. And that is why we rise above the animalistic level, because now there is a choice for another system, i.e. the choice of establishing the system of Deen. This means that living life under the man-made systems simply cannot provide us with the access to the choice presented by Allah. Hence we live at an animalistic level because animals don't have a choice, where no possibility of that self-development exists, which is revealed and referred to in the Book of Allah. Let us look at some verses in connection with this verse 171. The life of Iman and Kufr is differentiated, for example, in Surah 47, Inna Allaha yudkhilul lazina amanu wa amilu salihati jannatin tajri min tahtiha al-anharu wallazina kafaru yatamatta'una wa yakuluna kama taqulul an'amu wan naru maswallahum. Verily, Allah will admit those with Iman and solid deeds to Jannat beneath which streams flow. And this is very important because Allah is relating to Himself, but actually those who become Momineen and do solid deeds with a view to develop their self automatically becomes eligible for that life of paradise in the life of the hereafter. And of course, this is an important aspect of establishing the system of Deen on the planet Earth. While those who do kufr, that is, who reject the message of the Quran or think that there is no higher purpose to life, then what they do is will enjoy and eat as cattle eat. That is, they live at an animalistic level, and we can see plenty of examples around us, and the fire will be their abode. And of course, the combined living of every one of them has turned this planet Earth into hell, and we can see plenty of it around us. In another place, Quran says, لَقَدْ زَرَعْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا وَلَهُمْ أَعْيُنٌ أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. Many are the jinns and men, and jinns over here we know are the people who used to live in desert, that is nomadic people. And ins are the men who live in habitations like urban areas. We are made for Jahannam. They have hearts wherewith they reflect not. And again over here we can see we are made for Jahannam. Allah is relating to Himself that these people, because of not using their intellect and reasoning and not coming to the Quran, live a life of hell, that is absence of self-development, and as a result they live at an animalistic level. And then Quran explains it. They have hearts wherewith they reflect not, and hearts over here, qulub over here means intellect and their reasoning potentials. Eyes wherewith they see not, they see the things around themselves, but do not question it, do not turn it into some kind of useful information. And ears wherewith they hear not, they are like cattle, nay, more misguided, for they are heedless. Because animals follow their instincts, whereas human beings have to follow the external guidance. They do not have to follow their own unbridled desires and as a result create problems. And it is very visible. People who use their unbridled intellect and desires and they follow them, they create problems in the world, and they know they are creating a problem in the world. And when their attention is drawn towards solving human problems, they ignore it, rather they go against them and start conspiring against them. Pointing to the attractions of the physical life, Quran says, Zuyyana linnasi hubbu shahwati minan nasa'i wal banina wal kanatir al mukantarati minaz zahabi wal fiddati wal khayl al musawwamati wal anami wal harsi zalika mata'ul hayati dunya wallahu indahu husnul ma'ab. And I have highlighted mata'ul hayati dunya, that Quran says that you should always take your life in this world as a journey and only carry that much sustenance with you which is required for a journey. The state of human life is such that here there are countless pleasant and alluring things which are the cause for attraction for man. This thing we should keep in mind, that whatever we are finding around us, it is meant to be like this, which means the world is created for a particular purpose so that we can develop ourselves and grow out of these biological affinities. For example, love of wife and children, and we can replace it. If we are a wife, then we can replace it with a husband. Heaps of gold and silver, horses, cattle, etc. Man is attracted towards these. This is not bad. Quran doesn't reject it, but it says that it is, we should appreciate its utility value for the journey through which we are going through on this planet. But to view these as being the aim of life is wrong, not thinking that these define our success. These are just the means for human physical life. Those people who consider these to be the aim of life, leaving aside the giving of life for a higher value, they do not even wish to suffer in the slightest. And we experience it around us. Part of this verse is covered in the next slide. The word is created to help us in the growth of the self. And this is an important statement I have put down over here, that the way we should look at the word is that in this journey, whatever we are coming across, it is for the growth of our own self, that is our nafs. And that should be the focus of our attention. That is continuing from previous verse. Contrary to this are the Jamaat Momineen, whose iman is that worldly life and its means of sustenance are not the goal of life. These are a means to achieve a lofty aim. Very important point we should keep in mind all the time and get used to it. We have to create this kind of awareness about the life on this planet Earth. And that lofty aim is the development of the human self, which is achieved through the permanent values. So obviously, if we do not know the permanent values, we cannot develop our self. So both are interlinked. And of course, with the permanent values, we also have to manifest divine attributes. And we have gone over it previously. Hence, when there is a clash between a worldly interest and a higher value, they willingly sacrifice the worldly advantage for the protection of the higher values. So this is about Jamaat Momineen, which we are aiming to become on this platform. They achieve a lofty status, which is very beautiful and delightful for the real life. Next is, the word is created in such a way so that our latent potentials can come out and contribute to development of ourself. This is a very important verse because sometimes people ask that why did Allah create the word the way it is? And here is the answer. Inna ja'alna ma alal arde zinatallaha linabluwahum ayyuhum ahsanu amala. I've highlighted linabluwahum and ahsanu amala. Whatever is on the planet Earth, we have made it a cause for allurement and attraction. Very important that this is a planned creation. Human beings is a planned creation. This world in which we are living our life, finite life on this planet Earth, it is a planned creation. So we should look at it from that point of view and then look at the Quran, that what exactly it is asking us to pay attention to, so that it becomes manifested in its use as to who chooses to adopt the path of balance and proportion. So that means what is created around us creates choice. As we live our life, the life around the physical life through which we go through, it creates choices at various points in our worldly life. And then we have to choose which path is according to the Quran and which is the path of Shaitan and Iblis. So obviously, if there is no Quran, then we will always select that path which is that of Shaitan and Iblis, which is in reality the balanced path of life. There is something very serious as well as enjoyable as well, because knowing the right path of life creates that satisfaction and contentment. But if we do not know it, then that creates suspicion, doubts, and uncertainty, and of course leads to fear as well. In another verse, Quran says, Alladhi khalaqal mauta wal hayata lil لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْغَفُورُ. So over and above this previous verse of Surah Al-Kahf, again we can see over here, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. The same terms have appeared here, but now Quran has added Al-Aziz Al-Ghafur. For the evolution of the universe, He has established the principle of struggle between opposing elements, and it is this very law which is also functioning in the human world. The individual or nation which keeps the constructive aspects dominant in the struggle of life, it remains alive and progresses forward. Very important point over here which I have highlighted, that the individual and nation, of course individuals then become nations by coming together, they should consider themselves only alive and progressing forward when they understand this tussle between haqq and batil, and then be part of this constructive process by using the Quran. And that is where they get the help of Allah's laws. So they are not alone in this, because now they are working on behalf of Allah on this planet Earth. And Allah does not let His own people go to waste. That which goes against this, its abilities to remain alive and progress forward, become erased, and ultimately death becomes imposed on it. The physical death of man himself is the criterion to evaluate the abilities of his self. And that is another important point which I've highlighted over here, that at an individual level, we should be very clear that when the death comes to each one of us, we should know that we have acquired that life which was meant to be acquired in the light of the Quran. And this is precisely the purpose of this platform, to help us to develop ourselves. If a self has become developed, then he becomes enabled to progress to the next evolutionary stages of life. This is the life of Jannat. So it is in our own hand. So our Jannat is related to the kind of self we have acquired through our own effort by acquiring new life within the values of the Quran and by staying together. If it has not been developed, that means it will become stunted, it will go into Jahim, and that is the life of Jahannam. Thus, for a moment, death is the gateway to further progression, not something to fear. So this is another important point, that the changes which take place within human self, once it becomes Momin, that new self tells this human being that now you are on a different path of life, a higher path of life, a path of eminence and loftiness. This is that Allah who has control over all of His program, and He keeps it protected from every kind of destruction. And that is what it means to be Aziz and a Ghafur. And we have to understand it and manifest these two attributes within ourselves by following these principles which are given in the Quran. Coming to terms with the Law of Requital. The functioning of the Law of Requital helps us to focus on acquiring eminence and loftiness by setting a higher aim of life. Quran says, وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. I've said it previously as well, that if somebody asks us what is the purpose of human life noted in the Quran, this verse 45:22 is the starting point. Do they not know that Allah has created the whole universe as haqq, that is al-haqq, for constructive results, not for meaningless and destructive outcomes? The aim of this is that the outcomes of the deeds of every self are manifested correctly and no one is treated unjustly. And this is the beauty of our creation and the Law of Requital, that we become responsible for our own deeds. And since we become responsible of our own choices, so at every point in time, we are extremely conscious of our choices. It is just like getting a degree, for example, becoming a doctor, dentist, lawyer. As we go through the university, and if we are doing well in every year, we know that at the end of our session, training session, education session, we will get our degree 100%. And that confidence, that trust within us on our own abilities, nobody can take it away. This is our own creation. This is our own achievement. Similarly, once we become Momin of the Quran and we know that Allah's laws are helping us, and we get the signs of it, then we are extremely confident that death simply cannot destroy us. This whole system of the universe is busy functioning so that the outcome of every deed of man produces its correct result. What a powerful statement of fact. Growing out from the chains of biological affinities, and this is a very powerful statement I put down over here, growing out from the chains of biological affinities and leaving them behind and acquiring mutual affection based on Iman takes us to a higher level of eminence. And this is the aim of the Quranic guidance. It is an evidence-based achievement. And Quran says, وَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ لَوْ أَنفَقْتَ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مَا أَلَّفْتَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ أَلَّفَ بَيْنَهُمْ إِنَّهُ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. Again, the verses terminating into two divine attributes, Aziz and Hakim. And mutual affection has entered the hearts of the members of your Jamaat, and this is what Allah is stating. This is that invaluable entity which could not have been achieved even by spending the wealth of the whole world. This was only possible by accepting Iman in the divine law, due to which their attention diverted toward the lofty aim of life by moving away from individual self-interest. And this aspect became the cause for the coming together of their hearts. This point will become clear in our last slide of today's session. This law of Allah encompasses within it both control and solutions. This is what Aziz and Hakim means. Schematic from basic emotive living to higher Quranic eminence. Now, at a basic level, human beings live life within the domain of their unbridled emotions and intellect. This is a conflict-ridden environment. The Quran calls it the state of darknesses. Because we see this, for example, at a basic level, the relationships between husband and wife are very emotional. And even with the siblings are emotional, because over there they are operating under the domain of relative values. But the same husband and wife, once they go into business, for example, through rational thinking, they play a role at this level where emotions operate within the domain of man-made systems. For example, within a work business environment. Same human beings who are living at home under the domain of emotive environment, they go out and in the business environment, they are very rational and they do not become emotive. Their emotions are under their rational thinking. And as a result, they make less mistake. They are very careful what they say and how they deal with others. This is also the phase of unbridled desires. Here we use our unbridled intellect to achieve our desires. So both these stages of rational thinking and emotional thinking without the Quranic value system are under the rational values. These are man-made systems, man-made laws are applicable over here. We can see that the Quran doesn't come into it. Then next is the collective system of each nation is based on man-made laws. So these rational beings and emotive beings who are working under their unbridled desires, they create nations. And elite of these nations are the ones who have drawn these borders on the planet Earth. And this is the relative values. And individual life is focused on material successes as defined by the system of a nation. So that is why from one nation to another, the values change. One constitution of one nation is different from the constitution of another nation. Even the domains, provinces, and territories under one nation at times have different constitutions. So this is the way man-made system functions, differences at every level. And when there are differences, there are bound to be conflicts and chaos. The underlying assumption is that life ends with death. And this is something which we should always keep in mind under the man-made system. All man-made systems are based on this assumption that the life ends with death. Permanent values do not appear as a choice. Religious beliefs provide false emotive contentment. Religious beliefs only take care of it, that whatever little good, for example, charity work they might be doing or being kind to others, but at the same time doing injustice to others, they think that somehow there is a God who is going to take care of their hereafter. Mostly now under the secular system, those things are also becoming diluted, and religious beliefs more or less are disappearing gradually, particularly in the Western world and developed world. Now, I've drawn this line over here, this dotted red line, human level world of 2026. So most of the human beings who are not coming to the Quran or who do not have access to the permanent values, they live life within this domain. And we can check it. It is a fact-based schematic, and it will solve a lot of our problems. And this schematic can help also to explain to others that what it means to come to the Quran. If people are happy up to living life up to this dotted line, fine, they don't need the Quran. Here, another choice can make its appearance if the guidance of the Quran becomes available. So, below this dotted line, there is only one choice, that is to live under the man made system, and whatever it throws at us, we simply cannot complain because all our choices are within this man made system. But having gone through this barrier that is coming to the Quran, now we have created another choice. The permanent values appear before us as an external choice. If we are unhappy with the man-made systems, that is Taghuti system, then these values provide an alternative. So the beauty over here is that over here under this man-made system, we do not have any external guidance to guide us. And our internal desires, our own emotions are the ones which create problems. And that is why we can see at a basic level, human beings live emotive life, and that is why there are divorces and violence and fights among siblings and also social problems, because people do not use their rational side and they follow the relative values. But the moment we come out of it, now we got an external standard. And who provided the external standard? Whose laws are working everywhere in the universe. If we decide to opt for Iman in Allah, and we can go through this verse 256, which we have gone through previously as well, as part of the process of seeking guidance, that is after rejecting Taghuti system, then the Quranic guidance reveals itself to us. And this is a very important point, that the first thing to understand the Quran and accept its Iman is to reject the man-made system 100%. That is, reject the man-made system and its values 100%, even if we are the beneficiary of this system. And we gradually advance forward from individual to collective understanding. And always we should keep in mind in the study of the Quran that it is about laws. Allah does not go against His laws. It makes no difference to Allah if there is not a single moment from one batch of human world who comes out. For example, out of these 8 billion people, if not a single moment comes out of it, it makes no difference to Allah because He strictly follows His own laws. And that is the way Momineen should also look at the book of Allah and look at the human world. They have to be very firm, very persistent, because if they are not, then forget about the system of Deen, because if they do not become those Momineen who follow the laws of Allah strictly the way their Allah follows those laws, they simply cannot get help from the laws of Allah. Life gets on to a totally different plane where the light of the Quran helps to remove darknesses. So man-made systems, problems created by the man-made systems are called darknesses, zulumat by the Quran. The Quran becomes an external guide, and see how Allah takes away all our worries. Once we have an external standard, then we don't have a worry. We just follow it after accepting that this external guide is for us. Allah's attributes serve as a model. No self-development possible under relative values. The word of 2026 is based on Taghuti system. And Deen as a system then emerges after this line, because below this, no system of Deen can emerge. And that is why these sectarian versions of Islam simply cannot establish the system of Deen. Now we go to the next verse, 172. Jamaat Momineen reminded about the provision of Rizq. या अय्युहल्लज़ीना आमनू कुलू मिन तय्यिबाति मा रज़क़नाकुम वश्कुरू लिल्लाहि इन कुंतुम इय्याहु ताबुदून. I've highlighted Ya ayyuhallazina amanu. So that means the system of Deen is there. That is why these Jamaat Momineen is being addressed. O Jamaat Momineen, see to it that you never adopt that kind of path and never lend an ear to those kinds of assertions of theirs that our ancestors have declared this to be halal and that to be haram. As has been stated earlier, the rizq which Allah has bestowed, that is the means of sustenance made available on the planet Earth, consume it according to the manner instructed by Allah in a halal and tayyib way, and bring it into use according to the program defined by Him. This will be evidence of this fact that you obey Allah, not their ancestors. So it is not about words, it is about acting on these commands of Allah. The commonplace translation of this verse is, O you who believe, eat of the good things what we have provided for you and be grateful to Allah if it is Him you worship. And we can say grateful to Allah means that at the end of every food we say Shukr Alhamdulillah, and worship we know what it means. So these kind of translations can never ever help create the system of Deen, because these can never help people to become Momin in the first place. Expanding the meanings of the verse. After pointing to the state of being dumb, deaf, and blind, the Quran has asked the Jamaat Momineen to follow the guidance on the consumption of food and drink, which is an important aspect of physical life. Next, all rizq which is provided by Allah should be utilized following the general guidelines provided by the Quran. Three aspects of this utilization of rizq, that is the means of sustenance, are noted. Firstly, it should meet the criteria laid down for what is halal. Next verse, this will be covered in the next verse. Secondly, it should be tayyiban, all that which has nutritional value to be established empirically, is pure, not contaminated in any way, meets individual choice aesthetically. So see how far Quran goes. It says that all those things which are halal, out of that you should make a decision based on these facts, their nutritional values, their appeal, and of course if these are pure. Thirdly, by stating washkuru, not only individually but collectively, this rizq should be made available to every member of society and the world. So shukr over here means, that is the shukr, what it means in the Quran is to bring out our best, that all those latent potentials which are within us, we should use them constructively. And one part of that is that this rizq should be distributed equitably among all members of the society, and this should not accumulate in few hands. The next part of the verse, and this is I've taken from Surah Nahl 114, which we covered previously, because over there, over and above what is noted in verse 172, the term Nemat Allah has appeared, makes it crystal clear that it should be taken as Nemat Allah, Allah's bounties, so that it is distributed and consumed in line with the values of the Quran. That is, these should be counted as Allah's bounties, not human bounties, because human beings are taken out by Allah conceptually, and that is the way Jamaat Momineen thinks. The last part confirms all the above aspects when it is stated, Iyyahu ta'budun, and we know the meaning of abad, which means to obey Allah's laws. It is the precondition to the affirmation that we have Iman, we will do this. So there is no if and buts over here. If we are Momin, then we have to obey it willingly, because otherwise we can't get the results which are noted in the Quran. Next slide, defining human freedom. The condition of those religious leaders who consider the maslak of their ancestors to be the deen of Allah is that they sit compiling lists of haram and halal and keep shackling human freedom in their self-created chains. You should take that to be halal which Allah has declared as being halal, and only take that to be haram which He has declared as being haram in His own book. And this list is very short, very important. If we follow the Quran and we want its benefits and work for the system of Deen, we have to strictly follow the Quran in word and deed. It is important to understand the philosophy of Haram and Halal in the light of the Quran because this has been accorded a fundamental importance in Deen. Allah has created man free. I will repeat it. Allah has created man free to make his own choices. According to his proclamation, every child of Adam, every human being, merely due to being human, is deserving of respect and honor. We have given blessing to Bani Adam. He has declared in very clear terms that no human being has the right that he should make another human being his subordinate, make him obey his will, keep him under the obedience of his commands. No human being has this right, and this is stated by the Quran, no matter if Allah has given him the code of laws or power or even nubuwwat, that he should tell other human beings that, leaving Allah, you should adopt subjugation to me. And I've quoted the Arabic part of it over here. We can go through this verse in our own time. This is from Surah Al-Imran. Therefore, according to the Quran, no human being has this authority that he should place any kind of restriction on the freedom of other human beings. And this is a very powerful statement taken from the Quran, that each one of us who are aiming to become Momin or have become Momin, they should look into their hearts and see that they have no iota of any desire to control other human beings. Because that tendency to control other human beings will prevent us from understanding the Quran. Some limits need to be defined in collective life. But in life, certain constraints are also necessary. These constraints are of different kinds. For example, a physician instructs a patient that you are not to consume meat for a certain number of days. It is obvious that to obey this decision of the physician is not obedience to someone's command. This is his professional advice and compassionate counsel, which it is our choice to accept or not. By accepting it, we will reap benefit. Not accepting it will lead to harm. And same is the position of the Quran. If we follow the Quran without any compulsion, then it is to our own benefit because the life continues beyond death as well. And secondly, if we are quite happy to live under the man-made system and the hell it has created, and we are the beneficiary of it, then we really do not need the Quran. We simply has to follow the precepts of the man-made system. We accept it willingly. From this, our freedom is not taken away. Second is the legislative parliament of our country, which consists of our representatives, formulates a law and the government implements it. For example, this law that you should walk on the left side of the road. Obedience to this law is in reality also not obedience to someone else's laws. It is obedience to our own decision. Thus, our freedom is not affected due to this either. The point over here we should keep in mind is that under the system of Deen, all these laws will be made as sub-clauses under its permanent values. But contrary to this, a person says that a certain thing is haram according to Islam. This means that this person not only places a prohibition on millions of Muslims of his own time, but shackles the coming Muslim Ummah until the end of times to this command in such a way that whichever individual goes against it, he is declared to be a criminal in both this world and the hereafter. And this is the situation existing within the sectarian Islam. And the interesting part is that people who are accepting all these commands and these so-called Shariat are following it willingly and not thinking through it that whether these are according to the Quran or not, and as a result, they have willingly put the chains of these false beliefs around their necks and in their mind. For this kind of severe prohibition, there should be some clear and defined authority. What is this authority as per the Quran? That which is forbidden is noted in the Quran to promote the development of the self. That is the next verse, 173. إنما حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل به لغير الله فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Remember, out of the things to eat and drink, 4 items are haram, that is forbidden. Dead bodies, blood, particularly the flowing blood, the flesh of a pig, and whatever is associated with the name of some other than Allah. But whichever individual becomes forced due to hunger to do so, then he is also permitted to eat these things, provided that his intention is not to break the law and to transgress the defined limits. Very important point. In that situation, the law of Allah will keep him protected from those harmful effects which impact the human self due to the consumption of these things, and as a result of which the development of the human self ceases. We go to the next slide. These aspects lead to self-development. As part of self-development, the Quran here defines a few limits on the aspects of the consumption of food. It declares 4 things haram, that is forbidden, which include firstly, dead meat, secondly, flowing blood, thirdly, the flesh of swine, and fourthly, any food over which the name of any entity other than Allah has been invoked. We need to remember these 4 items by heart, as these have significance in relation to our self-development. However, interestingly, despite declaring these to be haram, the Quran has made an exception in the case of some such situation where, for example, for the purpose of saving life, we may have to consume any or all of these in order to survive. And that is a very important point to note in this verse and other verses similar to it. This means that forbidding these is not related to any harm to our physical body. Otherwise, the Quran would have pointed to this aspect. For example, not to take dead meat over a long period. For example, in a desperate situation, such as being trapped without food over many days. And that is another important point, because Quran has not said that you are totally forbidden to use these under any circumstances. It says that under exceptional circumstances where your life is threatened, you should be able to use these and consume it in proportionate manner. Here we need to look at the psychological aspects of their consumption, and that is the important point to note in this verse. The Quran addresses those who have accepted Iman and thus have given a new psyche to their self, i.e., their outlook, vision, insight, conduct, and whole character become transformed. Continuing with some more comments. Generally, human beings do not go near dead animals, but by forbidding their consumption, the Quran has asked us to stay away once and for all and make this a part of our psyche. Regarding blood, the Quran has made it clear not to consume it as a fluid. For example, to drink it. Blood being left on the meat of an animal is not an issue, as some of it is simply unavoidable, but consuming blood as such has many associations with human ceremonial rituals. Regarding the consumption of swine, that is pork or pig, this is also related to the human psyche. Pig head, pig, and swine are used as derogatory terms in human society for a long time. This has psychological connotations, and here the Quran has possibly referred to this aspect. For example, in verse 145 of Surah Al-An'am, Quran says, Daman masfuhan aw lahman khinzirin aw lahma khinzirin fa innahu rijsun aw fiskan. The word rijs has been used in relation to not using intellect, also those acts which affect human eminence. We should keep in mind that the focus of the Quran is on the development of the human self, which has to establish the system of Deen, and it must acquire all those traits which manifest divine attributes. Any hindrances to be removed. Going to the next slide, continuing with the issue of halal and haram. Regarding the Jews, Quran says, and I have just quoted one verse, we can look at 145 as well. فَبِظُلْمٍ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ هَادُوا حَرَّمْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ طَيِّبَاتٍ أُحِلَّتْ لَهُمْ وَبِصَدِّهِمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ كَثِيرًا. For the zulm of Jews, that is, Jews had gone astray from the path of Allah, we made haram for them tayyib things which had been halal for them. Very important point over here, that Allah is relating to himself, whereas the Jews themselves had invented all kinds of lists of halal and haram as the sectarian Islam of today, in that they hindered many from Allah's path. Next, it appears that they were punished, and I put it under inverted commas, with additional things which were to be deemed haram in relation to food. This is in reference to Jews themselves, including these additional things as haram, and Allah has declared it to be a punishment imposed by them on their own selves. Allah has related it to Himself. So, for example, the sectarianism is a punishment from Allah, which human beings, that is Muslims of today, Allah has related it to Himself. For example, the state of sectarian Muslims in today's world is a punishment imposed by Allah because they have gone against the laws of Allah as revealed in the Quran. So they have given up on the book of Allah. As a result, they are suffering for the last many centuries. The same is the situation with the Muslims of today, who are suffering by resorting to transgressions of every kind, and this can be checked using the Quranic criteria. Next is, the last point is also related to the human psyche. Something which is sacrificed or cooked in the name of other than Allah, unknowingly consumed as such, has a serious impact on a self which is aiming to become eminent for a very high purpose of life. In terms of food, there is no difference whether Allah is invoked on it or not, but it plays a role in acquiring a higher consciousness together with other values of the Quran. And that is important. If we want to establish the system of Deen, and then once the system of Deen is established and we want it to become sustainable and endured over a long period of time, then we have to have that psyche which follows Allah's laws willingly, knowing the implications of going against it. Because if our psyche changes, the outer world changes. This aspect is essential to motivate us for the establishment of the system of Deen. Those who become flag bearers of the system of Deen need to realize the self-development associated with the willing acceptance of Iman and carrying out of solid deeds. This will be expanded under verse 177, which will come in next session. Some further reflections. The verse then concludes with two divine attributes, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, i.e., understanding this aspect of halal and the provision for exception will lead to protection and further growth and development of the human self. How will this take place? As we know, the Quran is helping us to educate and train our psyche in order to deal with the issues and problems arising in the world under the man-devised systems. And this is important because people who create problems, the psyche at which they create problems, in order to solve those problems, they have to go above that psyche. They have to acquire a higher consciousness. And Quran is taking us right to the top at a very lofty heights, telling us this is the way human system functions under relative values, and this is the way Deen will function under the permanent values. So in front of Momineen, both systems are very crystal clear in their finest aspects of values. Unless clear lines of demarcation are drawn, the human psyche remains confused at every crossroad of life regarding making the right choice. For example, as a beneficiary of the man-devised system, we can easily become satisfied with the existing state of applying halal outside the domain of Deen. And that is why we can see that under the sectarian Islam, people are still concerned that even living under the worst kind of man-made systems, they are looking for halal in their land and become satisfied that they are following some precepts of the Quran. And that is why they simply cannot come out of the state of diminution, or should I say humiliation, in which they are living. Having clearly recognized the Quranic injunctions and their importance in the development of the self, this should provide us with total trust and confidence on this path, as we know that this will lead us towards that success which Allah has defined clearly and emphatically in His book. So if the concept of Allah is clear, then we will know the importance of the Quran and the importance of following it. And then once the process of self-development starts within us by being together and accepting that Iman, we will ourselves recognize based on evidence that the path is correct. Regarding Halal and Haram, the criteria have been laid down, and we should reject everything which falls outside these criteria knowingly and knowing the harms it will cause. We go to the next verse, 174. Tampering with the book of Allah results in infinite harm. And this is ongoing in today's world. إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزل الله من الكتاب ويشترون به ثمنا قليلا أولئك ما يأكلون في بطونهم إلى النار ولا يكلمهم الله يوم القيامة ولا يزكيهم ولا هم عذاب أليم. I've highlighted two parts which I thought need a bit more explanation. Those people who, by ignoring that which is declared haram by Allah, begin to prepare their own lists of haram and halal, and in this way, by taking the authority of Allah into their own hands, make them the means by which to obtain worldly benefits, no matter how prosperous and holy they may appear. You should consider it as being like this. They are not acquiring the means of sustenance, they are filling their bellies with live coals. That is, they are filling it with fire. Today they are strutting around very joyful and conceited, but at the time of the manifesting of the results, you will witness that Allah will not even speak to them. I.e., the successes and delights available through His law will not even glance at them, and their human potentials will continue to remain buried without ever being realized. So this is what it means to talk to Allah. This will be a very severe chastisement. At this moment in time, the realization will be dawned on them, and the estimation will become clear to them how paltry and of low value was the price for which they sold human eminence. And we should always keep in mind that all of us have to die one day and move on to the next stage of our life. Next slide is usual translation and implications of this verse. Those who conceal Allah's revelations in the book and purchase for them a miserable profit, they swallow into themselves naught but fire. Allah will not address them on the day of resurrection, not purify them. Grievous will be their penalty. I put it down over here because this translation again does not do justice to this verse. This translation does not link with the previous verse, and as a result, people reading it think there is no harmony and coherence in the Quran. Some even declare it to be contradictory. By not relating to the law of requital, some think there is frequent mention of fire and punishments in the Quran. Some people do not like being threatened. Some even think that they will be meeting Allah on the day of resurrection, and that is where the concept of sufarish or intercession comes in, and they think that the messengers somehow will intercede on their behalf. And this leads to creating this belief to please Him through tasbih and worship. This translation also gives this impression to some that somehow Allah is desperately asking for human attention and not purify them, as if man has to do nothing and all is resting upon the favor of Allah. And this is quite a common belief existing among religions. The last part of the verse sums it up for them, that it is all about pleasing Allah through worship to avoid any penalty in the hereafter. Reject the Quran totally to seek physical benefits. This verse points to the state of subjugation and humiliation in which the Muslim nations of today find themselves from ignoring the guidance of the pure Quran and by committing shirk. About shirk, the Quran clearly and unambiguously declared that such people will live in a state of dependence on other strong nations. And I've quoted over here part of the verse from Surah Al-Hajj, وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَكَأَنَّمَا خَرًّا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَتَخْطَفُهُ الطَّيْرُ أَوْ تَهْوِي بِهِ الرِّيحُ فِي مَكَانٍ سَحِيقٍ. Remember, the person who obeys someone other than Allah and bows down in front of him, he becomes deprived of human eminence. And we know shirk means to mix up the man-made laws with that of some of the aspects of the Quran. The example of such a person is as if he fell down from the heavenly heights to the lows of the earth and became so helpless and abandoned, just like a newborn bird snatched away by a wild kite or vultures, and became so weak and feeble that every gust of strong wind flies it away like a light feather to a far off place. And we can see all Muslim countries are driven right, left, and center by the most powerful. The verse mentions Wala yuzakkihim, and for this the Quran has asked us to organize education, training in hikmat leading to self-development. And that is the very purpose of this platform of ours as well. Rabbana, Quran says, Rabbana wab'as fihim rasulam minhum yatlu alayhim ayatika wa yuallihum al-kataba wal hikmah wa yuzakkihim innaka antal azizul hakim. That is, once some of us, if understand this, then it is their duty that they should bring together everyone and learn the Quran as it is supposed to be learned as a system, and that is the way it should be done. Because no messenger is now coming, and Quran is completed and preserved for all times. Our Rabb send among them a messenger of their own who shall rehearse your signs to them and instruct them in the book and hikmat and aid self-development. Surely you are Aziz and Hakim. And this is the way we also become Aziz and Hakim within the domain of being human. Because this is important. In order to manage the system of Deen, we have to have power and also Hakim, that is to use it according to the Quranic value system. We go to the next verse, 175, knowingly heading in the direction of ruin and destruction. أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى والعذاب بالمغفرة فما أصبرهم على النار. This is because they purchased the wrong paths by selling the straight paths defined by Allah. In exchange for Allah's protection, they bought destructions. Just to reflect what brazen behavior this is to keep heading towards a hell of destructions knowingly and deliberately. And we see that because when, for example, Tolu Islam invites them towards the Quran, a lot of them, they turn their faces away and they say that there is nothing for them in this the book of Allah. There is no system. Some of them even academically go through the Quran and still deny that there is any system in the Quran because they are the beneficiaries of the man-made system and they do not want to give up those benefits. They somehow think that all the yatim and miskeen created by the man-made system is the fault of these yatim and miskeen human beings themselves. They don't see that the man-made system is the one which is creating these yatim and miskeen in the world. What a severe delusion they are gripped by about their capacity to endure. What a severe miscalculation they are making in this. Because life is going to go beyond death. And that will be that they will get a rude surprise once they die and then they become awakened again. They will simply not be able to confront this destruction. The commonplace translation of this verse is, they are the ones who buy error in place of guidance and torment in place of forgiveness. See again the word forgiveness over here for bil maghfirate, that it is Allah somehow will forgive them because they are worshipping Him and trying to please Him. Ah, what boldness they show for the fire. Next verse 176, one cause of humiliation and destruction is highlighted in this verse. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ نَزَّلَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ اخْتَلَفُوا فِي الْكِتَابِ لَفِي شِقَاقٍ بَعِيدٍ. So actually, they don't like the book of Allah. This is because the book which Allah has sent down is an absolute, unshakable reality because it is Al-Haq, in which there is not an iota of contradiction. But when human beings begin to create differences in this book by inventing Shariat using their own intellect, then they land up far from the right path. What can be the outcome of this other than ruin and destruction? So it is interesting, they live under the domain of the man-made systems and are humiliated continuously by powerful nations, which themselves are also in the domain of living a life of hell, and they all are quite happy to keep discussing all these problems which all of them have created together under this man-made system. The commonplace translation of this verse is, their doom is because Allah sent down the book and truth, but those who seek causes for dispute in the book are in a schism far from the purpose. So while living under sectarian Islam, they are quite happy and they keep discussing it, and they also keep discussing unity as well, which is never ever going to come in their direction. Now we go to the final slide of today's presentation, which I had mentioned earlier as well, schematic on the contents of human consciousness. Over here, what I have done is that this is the psyche of a human being under the man-made system. And we can see examples of this, and we can add more to it, but I thought some should be mentioned over here just to illustrate the point. For example, under the man-made system, the human psyche wants wealth, increase in its own happiness, and minimize own pain. And in the process of doing this, it doesn't matter if millions go hungry at night. Their preferences, their own family and relations, but again, within these as well, there are fights and quarrels and dissensions because they are living at an emotive level. They are power hungry, there are dissonances, they themselves don't know what they want from their life. They like their cars, they like their houses, they are extremely competitive. And Quran says that this competitiveness should be redirected towards doing good. They want fame, and that is why there is a celebrity worship, pursuit of desires. Media and politics play important role because this is the whole system of system created by elite to misguide everyone else, including their own selves. They're concentrating on jobs, and they also have religious beliefs because religious beliefs provide them some satisfaction that somehow their version of God will save them in the life of the hereafter. And what I've done over here is I've quoted 3 verses over here. There's another verse from Surah At-Tawbah where Quran says that your priorities should be towards the system of Deen rather than towards the biological relationships. We can go through these verses in our own time. What is the procedure for freeing our minds and hearts from the chains we willingly or unwittingly, under the influence of man-made systems, acquire and then do not wish to free ourselves from? So if people are comfortable with all these kinds of contents of their consciousness, they are not coming to the Quran. And if they have all these within their mind and they are not uncomfortable with them and they are reading the Quran, there is no chance in hell for them to come to the Quran and understand and work for the system of Deen. What should we do? Process of creating space for accepting Iman plus solid deeds, creating the need and desire for guidance. And this is the simple model which the Quran is presenting before us. It is saying that bring in the concept of Allah which is given in the Quran based on His divine attributes. Think of yatim and miskeen who are equal human beings like your own self. They possess exactly the same self, and the system creates them. Identify them, understand their problems, and then develop yourself accepting this concept of Allah and bring in afterlife into it, because there is a continuity of life beyond physical death. And bringing in continuity of life, that is the life of the hereafter, means that what we do now, its results are bound to appear later in this part of life as well as in the life of the hereafter. That means none of our efforts will go to waste. And this is part of Iman. And this is only possible to develop by coming together, discussing it, and then accountability. And this accountability is actually a favor to us, because if we know about it, then we are fully conscious of our choices, including thoughts and deeds at every point in time. Simplified model of the contents of the human psyche, the priorities of the man-made systems and their effects on the human psyche. So see, over here there is a very complicated model of the contents of human psyche, and here it is replaced very simply by few concepts from the Quran. The concept of material needs and knowing the implications of assuming that life ends with death. And it will end with death. If we are living this life with this assumption, with this desire, with this choice that the life will end with death. Doesn't matter what religious beliefs we hold, over and above that, our life 100% will end in death according to the Quran. And this is based on evidence, because once we acquire that self, that moment self, which is explained in the Quran, and we acquire that and work together, that self will make us see the things very clearly in the outer world. Understanding the existence of the self and its latent potentials and their emergence and development. Two fundamental concepts on which Iman is predicated. Concept of Allah plus the concept of the existence of the hereafter in relation to the human psyche. And finally, La ilaha illallah, this is what it means, that all gods we have to take out of our head and then come to Allah as He has explained in His book, fully preserved for all times. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.